Welcome back. I'm Peter St. Onge. This is a weekly roundup of my daily videos on the economy and freedom, where I cut through the BS and lay out what the gaslighting clowns pulled out of their hats this week and what is coming next. With the Federal Reserve doing its best to strangle the Trump boom, job creation is finally slowing, and yet job openings are soaring. So this is odd. Usually if jobs are bad, job openings are also bad, but it's possible that deportations are finally showing up in the data. So first, the numbers. The Bureau of Labor Statistics announced 147,000 jobs were created last month. This trounced estimates of 110,000 jobs, and it was a huge relief after the separate ADP report showed private jobs shrinking. Unfortunately, once you dig in, fully 90% of job creation was either government jobs, state and local this time, not federal, or social assistance and healthcare, what the Wall Street Journal calls the welfare industrial complex. So jobs, meaning private sector productive jobs that make up 85% of employment and 100% of wealth creation, grew by just 16,000. Now, some of this could be deportation. Studies are saying up to 1 million illegals have already left, as in 1 million fewer customers, which will take some jobs with it, fewer people going to McDonald's. Deportation has an impact even before they leave, so they'll stop spending to build cash for the move. Plus, now they're thinking of that $60 KFC family pack in terms of what $60 buys in Mexico. To illustrate, jobs in accommodation of food services, which are illegal heavy, were up 20,000 last month, but job openings rose 314,000 in food and accommodation, suggesting a whole lot of people quit. Indeed, according to the BLS, since Trump took office, job quits across the economy are up 700,000 per month, while foreign-born employment is down 1 million. Still, deportation, self or otherwise, is only so much because jobs are even slowing in high-skill areas like finance and IT. So these are barely growing according to BLS, and they're down according to ADP. So what's happening there could be high interest rates choking business investment, while Trump's growth agenda either has not yet kicked in or is getting blocked in Congress. So Trumpomics has 4 parts: cutting taxes, cutting red tape, cutting federal spending and workers, and an investment boom that was supposed to come from all of those with an assist from reshoring production in the trade war. So out of those 4, tax cuts are not here yet. Big Beautiful just passed with 90% of the tax relief simply extending previous rates. Deregulation is even slower. One survey estimates 40% of Trump's deregulation is currently blocked by left-wing judges. The rest has to navigate the painfully slow Administrative Procedures Act. Cutting government spending, of course, did not happen thanks to rhinos in Congress, and that leaves the last man standing: investment. Now, private investment is actually up 5% quarter-on-quarter, which is very impressive, especially considering reshoring projects from the trade war are mostly still in the planning phase. It takes time to even break ground on a new factory. Still, investment and job creation could be even faster if the Fed stops strangling rates when inflation is running at 1%. So as such, we may be coming into the dip with Trump's agenda still on the planning board or stuck with the judges, while the Fed chokes growth in the here and now. The GDP Now tracker says we're currently running 2.5% GDP growth, which is solid if not epic, but we could see more slowing until either the Fed takes their foot off the brake, left-wing judges stand down, or we start breaking ground on some factories. Pharmaceutical ads could be banned from television. CNN says it could, quote, cripple them, which is fun. Are the days numbered for a gory laundry list of side effects to go with your Greg Gutfeld? The Trump administration is considering limiting or even banning pharmaceutical ads directly to patients. Meanwhile, a bill was just introduced in the Senate that would end all pharmaceutical advertising on TV, radio, print, and social media. Pharma would still be free to market to doctors, which they do a lot of, but they would not be able to scare customers into taking drugs they don't need for diseases that aren't real, that they don't have, or vaccinating against conditions so rare you may as well stop walking on sunny days for fear of lightning. Ironically, the Senate bill was introduced by Bernie Sanders and Angus Reid, who both caucus with the Democrat Party but are not formally in the party. In other words, the only 2 Democrats who are not on the payroll of Pharma. Now, banning consumer pharma ads would be a major victory for Bobby Kennedy. It was one of his core campaign promises, citing over-medication and industry influence over news coverage. The famous lockdown brought to you by Pfizer. Direct-to-consumer ads are actually a recent thing, taking off when the FDA relaxed rules in 1997. And today, those direct-to-consumer pharma ads make up nearly 1 in 4 ad minutes on TV, totaling approximately $5 billion last year, promoting 23,000 different prescription drugs. One study by Kantar Media found pharma ads appear in 70% of commercial breaks on CBS Evening News. Now, this has driven over-medication to the point 66% of Americans are on a prescription drug. 1 in 4 of them take 5 or more drugs daily. 40% of 20-somethings are on a daily prescription. The U.S. consumes 38% of antidepressants in the world, 65% of antipsychotic drugs, and 80% of opioids. Put together, and 1 in 4 adult Americans are on mental health medications, and they vote. And 1 in 8 American boys are on ADHD drugs alone. In Finland or France, it's 1 in 50. Of course, more drugs means more mistakes. One study by the Lown Institute estimates 1.3 million ER visits due to drug reactions. The FDA receives over 400,000 reports of drug-related injuries per year, with an estimated 7,000 to 9,000 deaths. That's on top of the 28,000 who die from opioid overuse. Now, studies have estimated that up to half of prescriptions in the U.S. are either unnecessary or inappropriate, with up to 20% actually harmful. That same Lown Institute study found even doctors estimate 1 in 4 prescriptions are unnecessary or harmful. So what's next? Banning ad sales is a good start, but it still lets pharmaceutical companies pay doctors for prescriptions. Direct payments are illegal, but pharma companies are allowed to pay consulting fees, speaker fees, and take doctors out to dinner or travel. One 2016 study found even a single meal from a pharma rep, who are often quite attractive, makes a doctor more likely to prescribe the drug being promoted. We can only imagine what happens with an annual trip to the Bahamas with a tidy speaking fees. As for CNN, losing 1 in 4 ad minutes won't cripple them. 80% of the revenue actually comes from fees you're forced to pay in your cable bundle. But CNN would certainly have to cut back on their on-air talent, which ironically enough could do even more for Americans' mental health than the drugs. A word from our sponsor. If you own gold or silver, you know they're a great hedge against financial instability and let you grow your wealth outside the banking system and gain greater control over your finances. Monetary Metals offers you the ability to increase your precious metal ounces every single month. Instead of paying to own metal, with Monetary Metals, you get paid 4% on your gold, paid in more ounces. Now's the time to secure your wealth and build your legacy in an asset that the government cannot inflate away. Join thousands of investors earning interest in physical gold and silver every month with Monetary Metals. Visit monetarymetals.com/Peter to learn more. Now back to our show. Germany's pension Ponzi is collapsing and America is not far behind. The warning comes from one Thomas Colby Zero Edge, who notes that Germany's pension scheme is already out of money, sustained only by annual 123 billion euro infusions from the federal budget. That's a quarter of Germany's federal budget. So in U.S. terms, it's like transferring an annual $1.5 trillion to Social Security's whole. The problem is Germany has a so-called pay-as-you-go pension system, meaning they spent all the surpluses in the first couple decades, the buildup of the Ponzi. Then when it hits zero, they have to plug the hole from current taxes. By the way, American Social Security works exactly the same way, with our 0 point set to hit in about 8 to 10 years. But it's already hit in Germany for 3 reasons: a shrinking workforce, Germans aren't having babies; soaring government spending driven by low-income welfare-gobbling migrants, along with massive increases in military spending; and third, suicidal green energy policies destroying the jobs and economic growth that pays for it all. So Germany has just 46 million workers, but has 21 million pensioners. That's growing by about 500,000 a year. In other words, there's just 2 workers for every retiree in Germany. As for spending, migrant unemployment benefits alone cost about $200 billion a year in U.S. terms. Throw in remedial schooling, many of them can't read, free housing, and free healthcare, and that could double. On top, NATO members just pledged to triple military spending to pacify Trump, which would cost Germany, again in U.S. terms, hundreds of billions per year. Meanwhile, the German economy has been limping at just 1.2% growth for a decade now, thanks to massive overregulation and a government that takes half of GDP. Industrial output is actually below what it was in 2013. It nosedived in 2020 when Germany effectively banned fossil fuels and nuclear, shutting down generation plants one by one. So far, they've shuttered nearly 14% of power generation. This has nearly tripled energy prices, which destroyed productivity in energy-intensive manufacturing like steel and cars. It's now 20% below where it was in 2019. Manufacturing lost 120,000 jobs in the last year alone. U.S. terms, that's like losing 500,000. This all matters because Donald Trump is doing everything he can to lure German industry to the U.S., along with their 5.5 million jobs, with lower red tape and taxes, lower energy prices, and a big, beautiful tariff umbrella. So what's next? For now, Germany will keep propping up the Ponzi by hiking taxes and draining general revenue. But they can't outrun the buzzsaw without economic growth and radical cuts to government spending. That means ditching the green fantasy, the regulatory leviathan, and cutting taxes and spending, especially on mass migration. Unfortunately, there is massive political opposition to all of these, meaning they'll keep kicking the can into the abyss, following Japan into stagnation until they run out of money, at which point Germany will rug pull millions of elderly on pensions, while the country itself becomes, as Politico put it, a, quote, open-air museum for American and Chinese tourists. As for the U.S., while Social Security faces the same fate, Trump is working on it. He's working on faster growth, at least slowing federal spending, and, of course, mass deportation. If someday Congress pitches in, we could even level out the plane. Big banks are groveling to Donald Trump, praying they won't be his next target. So writes the Wall Street Journal, writing, big banks are trying to, quote, get out of the crosshairs of what Trump is doing with universities and big law firms, both previously politically untouchable. So with woke universities, Trump is threatening to take billions of federal money and give it to trade schools, or even revoke their tax-exempt status because of racism. Meanwhile, he's punishing woke law firms, including security clearances and potential investigations for political lawfare and discriminatory hiring. There's now rumors Trump is sizing up woke banks, which is pretty much all the major banks, starting with an executive order on debanking, where banks literally cancel the bank accounts of conservatives using so-called reputation risk as cover. As in, if Wells Fargo processes Alex Jones' payroll, I guess everybody will conclude Fargo is not a real bank. Indeed, since Obama's Operation Choke Point, banks have boycotted entire right-leaning industries, including coin dealers, firearms, fossil fuels, and conservative media, including the Trump Organization itself. Now, this matters because if you can't get a merchant account, your coin dealer or gun store goes bankrupt, and your YouTube channel is donezo. So it's a backdoor way to cancel your First and Second Amendment rights. Meanwhile, if you can't finance an oil well, but the sky's the limit for windmills, banks effectively embezzle American savings using their government-granted oligopoly to steer the nation's capital to the left's darlings. From green energy to woke media like Axios or BuzzFeed, who can always get loans, to the commanding heights of speech, social media, and AI. So far, the political pushback has come from states' attorneys general, with 16 states, including Texas and Florida, threatening to bar discriminatory banks from state business. A state business is something like $1.5 trillion, so it got their attention. In fact, Florida law literally threatens dissolution if banks discriminate on religious or political grounds. But Trump would be the big kahuna since the federal government represents tens of trillions in business, as in being barred from federal dealings effectively is dissolution. Now, the banks are trying to get ahead of Trump both publicly and privately. Citi and J.P. Morgan have issued policy guidance against political discrimination, while both recently left a climate change banking alliance. Goldman and Morgan Stanley are promising to drop their ban on the coal industry Bank of America already has. Of course, this is all small potatoes, but according to the Journal, banks are, quote, stepping up meetings with Republicans, both at state and federal level, to work out common ground, which hopefully comes to more than a fat campaign donation. So what's next? Bank discrimination against conservatives, like all discrimination against conservatives by corporate America, is driven by a toxic stew of catering to left-wing regulators, left-wing rioters, and the left's capture of academia that both indoctrinates bankers and holds their social status hostage to parroting and enforcing woke dogma. As for fixing it, we've already got laws on the book against religious and racial discrimination that corporate America, including banks, have been ignoring for years. Even ideological discrimination is implied by creed in the foundational 1964 Civil Rights Act. The trick is enforcing the laws. Hopefully Republicans are serious this time. A word from our sponsor. One of the best ways to secure your Bitcoin is with a hardware wallet, a physical device that lets you keep your coins offline without internet connection. One of the most trusted names in hardware wallets is Kite, maker of the famous block clock. Kite devices are made in Canada and they're run by passionate Bitcoiners who've been at this since 2012, back when Bitcoiners were trading in person at swap meets. You can pick up hardware wallets and plenty of other goodies at coinkite.com/ProfSaintAnge. That's coinkite.com/ProfSaintAnge. Okay, back to our show. Donald Trump is threatening to replace Jerome Powell or even appoint himself Fed chair, making it a fruitful moment to ask, should central banks be independent? More important, can they be independent? Or will a central bank inevitably serve their banking masters and the permanent bureaucracy, the deep state? Donald Trump has been burning up the mean tweets over Jerome Powell's strangling interest rates. He's variously called Powell very dumb, very stupid, low IQ, numbskull, major loser, and Mr. Too Late. The issue is Powell keeping interest rates at some of the highest rates in 30 years, despite inflation running a measly 1% since Trump took office. This would be in contrast to 112 years of the Fed cutting rates whenever inflation drops below 2. High rates, of course, strangles jobs, growth, consumer debt, and it keeps housing on the edge of catastrophe. Now, some economists are uneasy with the pressure campaign because study after study in monetary economics says central bank independence is a good thing, that keeping politicians and their voters away from central banks leads to lower inflation. Of course, it's important to note that most monetary economists are literally paid by the Fed, paid with money they stole from you. A 2017 University of Chicago survey found 60% receive federal or central bank funding. A 2020 study at NBER put it closer to 70%. Some economics journals are literally run by the Fed. So, yes, studies would say the Fed should be God. But even if we ignore the corruption, the problem is we don't actually have an independent Fed. So in the Fed's 112 years, average rates under Republican presidents are much higher than Democrats, 4.9% versus 3.8%. So FDR got sweetheart 1.5% rates, Reagan got 10.2%. It's even worse adjusting for inflation, 0.7% real rates for Dems, which is almost free money, 3.1% for Republicans. So that's the difference between all you can eat for Democrat presidents versus 4 years of crash diet with Nurse Ratched for the Republicans. If we focus on the period since the Nixon shock, 1971, when the gold standard was replaced with money printers gone wild, it's actually worse. Negative 0.1% real rates under Democrats, that's literally free money, and fully 2 points higher for Republicans. The one time the Fed violates all this is when it's time to bail out Wall Street, so 2008, 2001, or 1987. So what's next? Central bank independence hands our entire economy to an unelected cartel of bankers who, in reality, deliver inflation, recession, and bailouts. Moreover, true central bank independence is impossible because a central bank will always serve the bankers and the permanent government bureaucracy who keeps them alive. To illustrate, former Fed Chair Janet Yellen was paid over $7.2 million in Wall Street speaking fees after her term. Other Fed chairs have headed cushy government-funded NGOs, gotten prestigious IMF jobs, or been rewarded with ambassadorships. The Fed, like all central banks, is a key hub of the deep state. So-called independence is nothing more than a smokescreen to give that cabal total control. Thanks for tuning in. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and go to petersanons.com for daily videos and in-depth articles with charts and all the gory details. Okay, we'll be watching. See you next time.